An armed standoff in Armenia and Iranian men in hijabs, two very different movements, both pushing entrenched governments to change. I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Omar Badar, and today, a stream update on these stories.
First to Armenia, which we covered last summer when protests erupted after the government raised electricity prices.
Every time the government has tried to do something like this, so in the past it was also transport fares, people have come out to the street. The government is just not able to push things like this forward anymore without having massive resistance by the population.
Now this summer, more unrest. This time, the crackdown on protests came as gunmen took over a police station and held officers hostage. The president is vowing to form a consensus government while throwing opponents behind bars. With us to talk about the latest developments, we have in Yerevan Babkin de Gregorian, an Armenian activist and political economist who we just saw in the video a moment ago. And in the US state of California, Amina Ishkanian is an assistant professor of social policy at the London School of Economics. Good to have you here both. This humble brag is on Babkin's Twitter page. It is pinned at the top of the Twitter page. It has been there since last year. I got it. Hashtag for the protest, Electric Yerevan, huge smiley face, and the date is the 22nd of June 2015. So, Babkin, we're talking about this as an update, but is this an update to Electric Yerevan, or is it a different chapter, an entirely different book?
I think it's important to look at Electric Yerevan as a chapter in a wider book. This is the fourth summer in a row that there have been massive protests. And in some ways, this is very much a continuation of what has been going on. But in many ways, this is also very different on for a number of reasons. First of all, for the first time in these 4 years, this is the first political protest in the sense that the demands were explicitly political rather than socioeconomic. Secondly, this is the first time that there has been violence involved and that there was an armed uprising as opposed to a peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience.
As an analyst, I mean, were you expecting this to happen? The protests haven't been violent protests. They haven't been taking hostages. They haven't been armed protests up to date.
I think I'm not entirely surprised, having studied civil society and movement in Armenia for over the past, 2 decades. I notice that the anger is growing and there seems to be these appeasements by the government, but nothing really changes. And even in the cases where there are small victories, they're very specific victories. So Electric Yerevan, yes, we stopped the fee hike, but then the wider issue of corruption that led to it was never addressed. A few years back in 2012, the activists saved a public park, Mashtod's Park, but again, the issues of how oligarchs take over public lands was not addressed. So I agree with Babkin that this is the first time where things have gotten political, but it's also the first time where things have gotten so violent. I don't think anyone expected the use of violence the way it has. But it's also been very difficult to frame this because it's brought together so many different groups into the streets. The Daredevils don't necessarily, by Daredevils, I'm referring to the people who took the police station hostage. They didn't have a wide variety of supporters before this. But once everything began to unfold, you had people from very different groups in civil society coming out, pouring out into the streets. And I don't think it was in support necessarily of their demands, of the group's demands, but because of a wider underlying discontent with the status quo.
Yep, so precisely, you mentioned the violence, and we have people who are weighing in on this online. We have Paul, who says the violence helped turn relatively isolated movement by the gunmen into national significance and expose so much that needs fixing. Babkin, do you accredit violence for this? Do you think that had things remained nonviolent, that it would not have gained the momentum that it has so far?
No, I disagree with that, only because last year with Electric Yerevan, the protesters stayed nonviolent. The police used excessive force, and that's what made it popular. But the thing about violence that we need to understand is that whether or not it's right or wrong, putting the moral arguments aside, it's often a strategically unwise move to pick up arms against the government because you're basically going up against a government that is always going to have bigger weapons, more guns, and you're bound to lose. What the violence did, or what the taking over of the police station did in this case, was that it added teeth to the protest that was happening outside, so that the protest outside started to look more like a real threat to the government.
Let me just show you this. Armenian opposition leaders arrested after hostage standoff. You mentioned Daredevils, Armenia. What do we need to know about them outside of Armenia?
Well, the Daredevils of Sassoon, as they're calling themselves, is a group of veterans from the Nagorno-Karabakh war, and they are the men who took the arms, the 30-plus men. But they are very closely linked to the founding parliament, which was previously known as the pre-parliament, which came out of the Sardarabat movement, which was established in 2012. And it's a group that has a very nationalist perspective and believes, has been asking for the resignation of President Serge Sarkisian and for a new transitional government to take place, followed shortly by elections. And I think what we need to recognize is that these men, particularly some of them who were in the police station, have never necessarily been involved in civil society activism. At least we haven't necessarily seen them. So they're new players. Some of them were, for instance, Pavlik Manukyan. He's been giving speeches for the founding parliament previously, but others were not. So what we have to see is a new group of actors coming onto the scene and changing the situation. I think this is quite significant because it's beginning to broaden out. Moreover, what we saw was one neighborhood in Yerevan, which is a very working class neighborhood, Saritagh, the mountainous area, becoming very, very politicized in these days. And so what is happening is there is a shifting of the political context. And I think we are living in a very dynamic and fluid period where it's unclear where things will go. And there's been a lot of back and forth discussion about the role of the diaspora, where you have more Armenians living outside the Republic of Armenia than inside the borders of Armenia. And questions are being raised of what role should the diaspora play, how should they engage, and so forth. So I think what we need to recognize is that the status quo, as I said, is no longer tenable, but no one really knows where it's going to go. And from my perspective, the ball is firmly in the government's court. Either they will take the path of reform, or they will take the path of repression. And what we've seen in the past, they've tended to say, yes, we'll deal with your demands, and then forget about them and just, move forward.
So,
absolutely. And I think adding on to what Armenia was saying, we are now living in a new political reality in Armenia where we're going to see a whole new host of new actors, both in the opposition field and otherwise, come out. And I just don't think this government is capable of making the reforms that are needed just based on their track record over the last 8 years in power.
So we have a couple of tweets here from Neri, who basically was essentially laying blame on both sides a little bit. So on the one hand, she says the response from the government was excessive and unnecessary. But what concerns me more is whether the government will take accountability for it. But goes on to say protesters make demands that stand a chance. For example, the prosecution of officers who used excessive and unnecessary force. Armenia, do you think that the protesters have been strategic in the kinds of demands they've been making to actually start having achievable increments moving forward?
I think, they make several demands. It wasn't just the resignation of the president. They also wanted the release of political prisoners. I think what I am concerned about is when people take to the streets we saw this, for instance, in Tahrir Square. You win the revolution, and then what is going to do? What is the plan for the day after? And I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Babkin, that I heard much of a plan going forward. There was these, we will win, and then this new transitional government will come in play, and then things will happen.
Let me just check, because Babkin, you live round the corner from the police station where that siege took place, so you were very close. Did you hear a plan for what next?
No, actually, if there's any criticism, is that this group was not a politically savvy group of people. This movement is not a politically savvy movement. By the movement, I mean the Sardarabat movement that became the pre-parliament.
Is it more muscle?
And I think,
Babkin, would you say it was more muscle than brain?
Probably
not, as you live in Armenia.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But I do want to make the point that I think right now the only reason why this government is still in power is because the opposition either is in jail, a number of opposition members right now are currently in jail. A lot of the leaders of the protests are now in jail awaiting trial. Either they're in jail or they don't have their acts together.
Let me show you
as long
something
as
here.
that persists, the government will be able to hold on.
Guess, let me show you something here on my laptop. This is from the Armenian president, and he said this on August the 1st. Just look at this statement here. The process of the radical changes in Armenia's social and political life must be expedited. Our goal is to form a government of national accord in which issues will be solved under a wide consensus. When you heard that, when you saw that, Armina, what was your first thought?
It sounds great. I'd like to see it be put into action. But I think one of your tweeters before said we'd like to see the government be held to account. And I think there is a widespread sense of feeling that people want more accountability, more rule of law, you know, a crackdown on the impunity of the oligarchs. I think this is something that has to be addressed because when all of this was unfolding, what we were confronted with was almost an absent government. The president didn't issue a statement in the immediate aftermath. I think it was several days, maybe 5 days until he issued a statement. And for many of the political parties in Armenia, again, there wasn't much of an engagement. We saw a couple of MPs, a few, opposition MPs, such as Nikol Pashinyan, making statements, trying to engage in dialogue and so forth. So I think words are great, actions are what matter. And that's what it's going to take to build trust in the country, to build a sense of confidence moving forward. Otherwise, sadly, and this is the sad reality, many Armenians are voting with their feet. They're leaving the country. And so I think the government really has a very difficult challenge at its hands, and it has to take this seriously and deal with it if it doesn't want to see an escalation.
Sure. Omar.
I can leave you with this tweet here from Mika, who doesn't trust the government. He says that all the promises for something positive are a smokescreen. What we need is to root out corruption, assure free elections, and respect human rights.
Babkin and Armenia, I have no doubt that I will be checking in with you again in the future. Hashtag Electric Yerevan, the next chapter. I wonder what the next chapter will be after this one. For now, thank you both. Now to Iran, where some men are making an unlikely fashion choice. And the woman who started this campaign is sitting right here with us on the stream. Masih Alinejad is an Iranian journalist promoting the hashtag Men in Hijab. She's also the creator of the My Stealthy Freedom campaign. And in New York, Nagar Mortazavi is an Iranian journalist and social media analyst. Ladies, good to have you here. Masih, Men in Hijab. Who is this campaign aimed at?
The government of Iran, which they always use the opportunity of freedom of speech in the West and ignore us, deny us, and saying that hijab, compulsory hijab, is part of Iranian culture, and they force not even the Iranian women, all non-Iranian women who want to visit Iran, non-Muslim women who live inside Iran, they force them to wear compulsory hijab. We want to get their attention, and all women around the world, their attention, and men as well. Because compulsory hijab, forcing women, a girl from the age of 7 to wear hijab, it's an insult to men, women even who do believe in hijab.
So Masih, a little bit before the show when we were talking, you said if I had told you that hijab was not important, you were going to make me wear one. Yes. So we didn't have one. But we do have actually a Raminak here in Iran whose mother is basically raising the question of how important this is. So he says, my mom we protested days after the 79 revolution and nothing has changed. It's not going to change now as long as Iran is under the current status quo. But goes on to say, she says women must do whatever it takes to be judges or president, but says that the hijab is irrelevant now. What do you say to Raminak's mom?
I just want to ask this lady that the first things when you want to go out, I'm asking actually you and you, Every morning, doesn't matter whether you're the president of the United States of America or you're a worker, a teacher, a nurse, what is the first thing that you think about it? Every morning, you use mirror and you think about your appearance. You think about what you wear. And I'm not talking about a piece of cloth. I am talking about my identity. If somebody forced you to wear a headscarf and come in this show, you were not your true self. You were somebody what the government wants you to be. So for me, this is just the beginning. It's the first step toward full equality. When they don't allow you to control your head, how are you going to control what's going on in your head? 60% of university places are women. And now they don't even allow women, and they think that you are not mature enough to choose what you want to wear. This is disgusting in 21st century, and this is just the beginning.
Let me just bring in Nagar. Nagar, you've been listening to Masih. I know you've been following her campaigns online. If you also tap into sentiment in Iran, what are you hearing about this campaign?
It's basically, I see this as something that has been going on, just like that user Ramin said. Since the days after the revolution, women have been trying to defy this mandatory, I would say, what started as a uniform in a way, and now it's just basically the Islamic hijab. For the past 4 decades, for every single woman who decided one day that I'm not going to wear what I'm said that I'm supposed to wear, and I'm going to take small steps, not completely remove it, of course, at the beginning. But if you look at the pictures from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s, and today in Iran, you won't recognize that it's the same society and it's the same law, because the law hasn't changed, but women have been slowly pushing it. And now we see it in the form of this social online campaign that's collecting these voices, collecting these pictures, and giving an online life to it. But it's something that's been going on for 40 years, for 4 decades since the revolution, and there's very little support, I would say, in the society for it. If after the revolution there was a stronger social base for some law like this, right now even the religious people that I talk to in Iran are not happy about the fact that somebody who doesn't want to wear the hijab is forced to wear it. Even though they like to wear it themselves, they don't think it should be forced on others.
So Masih, we covered back in 2014 on the stream, we did a web story about stealthy freedom in Iran, about men making fun of the online campaign. Have a look here on my laptop here, and men here are wearing hijab, and they're being silly basically, and they're basically making this campaign look like it's shallow, it's not important, what's the big deal? What's your response to them?
My responsibility is giving a platform to other men who strongly believe that compulsory hijab is an insult to men as well. So everywhere, it's not just in Iran, everywhere men making joke about the things women. I mean, you can find any social movement around the world, other people making fun of this. But there is a serious debate going on inside Iran. And for more than 30 years, we never had the chance to have our own words in any media inside Iran. You never have the chance to see any women, only just in hijab in Iranian TV. So this is now, we're living in a society that social media gives a platform to those people making fun. I invited men to join us and to try it and tell me how they feel about compulsory hijab. Then they didn't make fun. Actually, I received a picture from a man saying that, honestly, from the beginning when you invited us, I just started to wear it and making fun. He wrote that, and it was funny. My face was, silly, and it was funny. But after like a few seconds, I just thought, if I was forced to go out there in public every day, then I couldn't smile. I just, and now I'm thinking about my mother, my sister, my wife. And another man said that when I wear hijab, I don't see myself ugly because it reminds me of my mother who wears hijab.
Let me throw one more piece of criticism
Sure.
at you that we're actually seeing online from the people who think that it's pandering to Western sentiment in some sense. So we have Marissa here who says, I understand that mandatory hijab is a potent symbol that Masih is tapping into, but I must say, if you must appeal to Americans and Iranian diaspora, you have failed step one. And then we actually have a video comment as well that we just got in from Sogan. Take a listen to it.
Something that I'm sensitive towards is some people's problematic obsession with the hijab in the United States. And since you are based there, since My Selfie Freedom has a huge following in the West in general, and Men in Hijab was widely shared and promoted in the United States, I want to know if you think that you and these campaigns have had any issues with pandering to some Westerners' problematic, neo-Orientalistic obsession with the hijab.
That's a good question. So again, I have to be really direct. The most reaction I got, it was not from the beginning from the Western media. It was from my own country's media. And I was raped in Iranian state TV, in their mind, saying that Masih Alinejad was raped. Why? Because she undressed herself in London by 3 men. It was totally fake and lie. They were not even ashamed to involve my teenager son, saying that she was raped in front of her son. I got a lot of attack by the Friday prayers inside Iran. So it was not about Western media.
I may be misunderstanding you. What are you using raped as a metaphor? What are we talking about here?
No, they said that Masih was actually raped in the street of London.
So they lied?
They lied.
Okay.
So you see, the first reaction was from the government of Iran. Why? Because as Negar said, the protest is going on inside Iran. Those women who send their pictures to me, they exist in Iran. It's not a new challenge or new protest. I just give them a platform, give a voice to those voiceless people. But because this is an important issue for the government of Iran, so they attacked me, and then Western media came and started to support the idea of having freedom of choice, because I always say that.
So let me just check in here with Negar. Masih says this is an important issue for the government of Iran. Is it? Are they wondering about hijab?
Yes, definitely, actually. So the smear campaign that Masih is talking about that's been going on against her or whoever is doing these sort of, is taking up these sort of issues, including women activists inside Iran, is because this issue is way beyond religion or even tradition. This is a very political issue in Iran. This, I would say, is one of the last strongholds of the old revolutionaries, because this is the image of the revolution. The Islamic Revolution, the Islamic Republic that came forward was known to the world by the way it looked, by the way the women looked. And now the women look nothing like what the revolutionaries want. And the divide is not even within the society, it's within the highest ranks of the government. The current president, the current head of administration, Rouhani, has said in multiple public speeches that religion should not be forced on people. You cannot force on people. You cannot disregard people's dignity. And he's basically indirectly addressing a lot of these issues. Right. So it's going up to the highest ranks.
Yep. Negar, we have people who are echoing what you're saying online here on Facebook. Kaveh says, with the exception of some aging clerics, there is no other real class interested in upholding mandatory hijab. It is perhaps the most cost-effective political move. It makes a very large part of the population happy with little political expense. Do you think, Masih, that how close are we to a tipping point where this would change in Iran?
You know, this is, it needs a cultural debate and cultural change as well. Because in Iranian society, all the Islamic billboards, educational system, all the propaganda trying to say that women's hijab is a sign of honor for the men in the family. So just recently, there was a conservative newspaper called all the male actresses, which were presenting, they were present in an official event with their wives, saying that they are pip. Why? Because they believe that when the man does not have any control of the women's body and the way they dress up, they offering their wife to other men. And Iranian men now, they stand up to say that an honor doesn't mean that forcing your mother or sister to wear a hijab. So we need this debate to be alive in Iranian society and empower ordinary people.
So Masih Alinejad and Negar Matazavi, it's been good to have you on this program. This conversation isn't ending here. We're taking it online. Is that all? That's all for now. But we will continue with #AJStream, #MEnInHijab, #ElectricYerevan. Yes, this has been an update show. We got a lot in. We'll see you online. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.